In this video, we are talking about day 17 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial, where the disco bloodbath of Amber's testimony continued. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So today we finished Amber Heard's testimony on the stand after spending most of the day on the rest of her cross-examination and redirect. Then we sat through the video deposition of Io Tillett-Wright and started the video deposition of Rocky Pennington. Camille once again did a great job on cross-examination of Amber Heard, and although most of the fire in her cross was brought in day 16 as opposed to 17, she still got some good pieces out of Amber in day 17 here. But before we get into those details, let's hear from the sponsor of this video.
This video is sponsored by Morning Brew. If you're like me, you use your phone as your alarm clock. And if you're like me, maybe you also have a tendency to go to a certain social media app to get caught up on the world news first thing right after you hit that alarm clock. And maybe that also causes you to doom scroll down a particular rabbit hole of news and worry. I don't like to admit it, but it's kind of true. Well, the good thing is that there is a better way to get your morning news, and it's with Morning Brew. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter delivered right to your inbox Monday through Sunday so that you can get quick updates on the latest in the world of business, finance, and tech in just 5 minutes. And instead of getting bogged down with dry, dense, and boring traditional news, you can get your news with a kick of witty, relevant, and informative literature. And sometimes you can also get some good legal stories that aren't really getting reported elsewhere. As an example, I just learned that in the 4 years since the US Supreme Court ruled that gambling on sports was legal, Americans have bet more than $125 billion on sports. That's a lot of money. Anyhow, signing up for the newsletter is totally free and takes literally like 15 seconds to subscribe. So sign up for free at morningbrewdaily.com/legalbytes or click the link in the description below. And thanks again to Morning Brew for sponsoring this video.
So to start the day off, Camille decided that she wasn't going to go easy on Amber after yesterday. She immediately asked Amber about Johnny's alleged violence against her starting back in 2012. And also, Amber started fighting Camille pretty much on everything right off the bat, and I don't think that it was a particularly good look for her. If I were her attorney, and assuming she would listen to her attorney, I would have wanted her to pick her battles, because when a witness is fighting on every single detail on cross-examination, they start to tend to look less credible. As an example, in the beginning of today's portion of her cross-examination, Amber said that Johnny was violent throughout 2012, but that he took a break in the middle of the year. This characterization admittedly felt weird, even though she explained it as a byproduct of a stint of his sobriety. Nonetheless, Camille introduced the actual knife Amber had testified previously that she had given to Johnny in 2012. This was the same knife that both parties agree was a gift from Amber to Johnny, and which states on the blade, hasta la muerte, or until death. And rather than merely showing a photo of the knife, she asked the bailiff to actually unsheath it and present it to the jury to see it with their own eyes. Then she turned to Amber and asked her, "You gave this knife to Johnny while he was abusing you, correct?" And this, of course, was to indicate that Amber was not afraid of Johnny at this time, certainly not in 2012 when she gave him this very large, very sharp knife. Anyway, Camille then went back to talk about the Australia incident. And there she asked Amber about the wall-mounted phone that she says Johnny allegedly smashed onto his finger into smithereens, cutting off his finger in the process. When Camille showed pictures from Australia and said that Ben King had testified that there was no broken wall-mounted phone, Amber responded, "I disagree with your characterization." Now, this was a phrase that she used a lot during Camille's cross-examination of her today, and I think she really overused it, especially since she had a tendency to use it when Camille would describe something that the jury could actually see for themselves. I'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute, but first, let me talk about how Camille got into the subject next about the SA bottle situation. She went into some detail about it and then asked Amber if she had any medical records following that, and Amber answered no. Then Camille asked her about the photo of the black and red writing on the mirror in the bathroom. And Camille pointed out that Amber didn't take the photo of the mirror standing directly in front of it like someone normally would for a mirror photo. And Camille insinuated that Amber didn't take it that way because if she did, it would have shown that Amber had no visible injuries on her. And then Camille asked if the red text was in fact Amber's writing. Amber said no. So Camille essentially said, right, because if you did, it would mean that you were going off and writing stuff while Johnny was bleeding out with his finger, right? And this, of course, is to suggest that this probably actually is what Amber was doing and that she was doing it so heartlessly and callously and in such a cold fashion while her husband was severely, severely injured. And after that, Camille played the audio tape where Amber complains that Johnny always escapes and always runs away rather than staying and fighting. And Camille, right after that, asked Amber, you followed him around the house during this incident. You knocked on 5 bathroom doors and 2 bedroom doors, didn't you? And Amber responded that she only knocked on 1 door, but it didn't really matter because Camille was very effective at revealing throughout this whole line of questions that the various inconsistencies in Amber's narrative were there. And although admittedly Camille did at times come across a bit aggressively throughout this portion of her cross-examination, ultimately I still think that it was, at the end of the day, effective. Next, Camille asked about the alleged incident from a couple of weeks later, where Amber alleges another physical assault. And Camille here did an excellent job of keeping a quick rhythm of tight questions like you would want to see on a good cross-examination, getting Amber to agree that at this time Johnny had a cast. He had pins in his finger. He had a skin graft on his hand. He had a MRSA infection. All of this was to create a sense of skepticism for the jury as to whether or not Johnny could even physically harm Amber in the way that she alleged. Anyway, not much later, Camille brought up the photos that Amber had previously produced and testified to showing the cuts on her left arm. With the photo pulled up, Camille called them straight red marks on her arm. Amber then responded with, I disagree with how you characterize that, which again, to me, just seems like a really bad move because Camille's description of those marks is a very literal, straightforward description of those marks. So Amber is essentially telling the jury, you might see straight red marks on my arm in that photo, but disregard that description entirely. It almost feels like she's saying, actually ignore the photo altogether and just listen to how I would describe those marks on my arm. And watching this as the viewer here, I personally started to feel like we were all being gaslit by Amber because you can see the red marks on her arm right there, and you can see how they are both straight and red, and yet she says that's somehow incorrect. And in the end, that basically leads, I think, to the conclusion that Amber is probably living in some kind of complete different universe of facts than what is actually being presented to the jury. Now, another thing that Camille got into was the love notebook that Amber and Johnny shared, which included notes to one another. And specifically, Camille showed that there were some very sweepingly romantic notes written by Amber to Johnny. And although this wasn't exactly the most impactful or fiery cross-examination, it nonetheless did some productive things, including showing that she has a very skilled ability to write in a very many beautifully stylized ways. And some of those styles in that notebook looked quite a bit like the red lipstick mirror writings. Now, Camille never linked the two of these things in her cross-examination, but she talked about them close enough that the jury may very well have made that connection themselves. Anyway, then Camille went through more photos of Amber in the Bahamas and elsewhere after the various incidents, showing close-ups of her face. These close-ups showed no injuries on Amber. Camille also at one point pulled up an email about their wedding weekend, which was sent by, I believe, Amber, if I remember correctly. The email showed a schedule of events, and that schedule showed that after the 7 p.m. rehearsal dinner, they planned to have a dance party with drugs and music. So back when Johnny was testifying, when he said drugs and dancing was on the agenda, I thought he was speaking metaphorically in the way that he often does, seemingly about most things, if not everything. But as it turns out, drugs and dancing was literally on the agenda. Those are the words that were on the page for that email. And as Camille pointed out during the cross-examination, this was in spite of the fact that Amber testified that she was always so concerned about Johnny's drinking and drug use. And Camille essentially argued the point that Amber clearly wasn't all that concerned about Johnny's sobriety if she was always drinking and doing drugs in his presence. But let me wrap up Amber's cross-examination with this. Camille played a decent number of audio tapes during the cross-examination, but the one that stood out arguably the most to me was the one where Amber sounds like she's drunkenly mocking Johnny and his career, calling him a sellout, and really harshly mocking him about some kind of a tell-all book, as if she's going to come out and talk about their relationship in a book. She really comes across as kind of maniacal and evil in this clip, which contradicts sharply with the image that we see on the stand of Amber in the courtroom. Similarly, we heard the audio tape of Johnny and Amber where she's really losing it over Johnny saying he's essentially leaving her. She sounds like she's in full meltdown mode and even says things like she's in so much pain and that she's going to die. Again, this kind of emotion and the way in which it feels just feels very different than the side of Amber that we saw, even the very emotional side that we saw of Amber on the stand in the courtroom. And beyond that, Camille also managed to get in video footage of Amber during her August 13th, 2016 deposition. I really wasn't certain if she was going to be able to do this, but I knew that if she did, it really would be impactful for Johnny. Now, this deposition footage was very damaging because it shows Amber eating during her deposition, being aggressive and being very animated and just generally looking so different than how she's presenting herself in front of the jury. And that kind of performative inconsistency really is something that I think is going to play poorly for the jury. But as damaging as this was for Amber to reveal a completely different side to her for this jury, this wasn't even the fireworks that really came out of that deposition footage that got played in the courtroom. Let's roll a clip.
Ms. Heard, did you send a text message to Jerry Judge on May 24, 2016, telling Jerry Judge, quote, "I'm desperately trying to reach Johnny. It's extremely important. Please tell him"?
I remember sending the text message that is in front of me right now to Jerry. And I remember sending this because I wanted to tell Johnny or have him told by Jerry or someone who knew him or was close to him. Basically, I didn't want him to find out online that I had or was about to file, or I had already filed for divorce. I wanted him to know verbally. So I was trying to reach him through a third party to tell him. When I say reach, I'm specifically saying I would like him to know information coming from me or coming from Jerry for me so that he finds out about the divorce filing or my intention to do so from some other source other than TMZ, which was alerted.
You slipped up there, didn't you, Miss Heard?
Weird.
You let it slip out that TMZ had been alerted to your filing of the domestic violence.
alerted by what? I disagree. That's not what I'm talking about.
Now, this was incredibly damaging, and it led right into Camille's questions about Tasya Van Ree and the press coverage of Amber's alleged assault on her ex-wife at an airport. Now, it sounded like Johnny's team probably wasn't going to be able to get this testimony in, but somehow they did get it in there. And right before the end, when Camille passed the witness back for redirect. And ending on this note seemed to fluster Elaine Bredehoft when she got up for direct because she came across as blustery and unprepared. Now, keep in mind that regardless of how much wreckage there is after a cross-examination of any witness, generally the attorney wants to keep things short and simple on redirect. This is because they don't necessarily want to flag to the jury just how much of a dumpster fire that cross-examination was. And so ideally, the attorney should pick a few key moments to focus on for rehabilitation, letting the witness clarify, contextualize, or explain. But again, a few key moments that are going to be most impactful for rehabilitating the witness. And here, Miss Bredehoft's redirect did start out pretty decently, as she immediately worked to rehabilitate Amber on the Tasya Van Ree allegation. Miss Bredehoft asked Amber what, if anything, Tasya had said about the incident since then. And so Amber responded that Tasya had come out later and said that it was all false. Then Miss Bredehoft asked about the divorce filings, and Amber said she had been trying to be as discreet as possible. This, of course, is getting to the whole TMZ leak issue about the divorce. And truth be told, this part was okay. But then Miss Bredehoft spent an outsized amount of time focusing on the start of Camille's cross-examination, which had started on day 16, about how Johnny had said that Amber would never see his eyes again. She spent a lot of time on it, and it didn't really move the needle. I mean, honestly, it seemed like such a small point that I can't think of any real reason why that would be important to Amber's case. And it also started to feel like Amber and Miss Bredehoft were not fully understanding each other and where they were going with the redirect, and you could definitely see some tension rising here. And ultimately, what felt like a essentially disorganized flailing about, Miss Bredehoft seemingly gave up on redirect and concluded the whole thing. Now, a very interesting thing that happened here was that Judge Oscarati started to excuse the jury for recess, and in the middle of that, Amber just got up and essentially stormed out of the courtroom while the jury was still there. Note that during every previous recess, the jury has gone out first while everyone else in the courtroom stands and waits for them to leave before leaving themselves. So after a whole month plus of being used to this order of things, Amber has suddenly departed from it. And I don't know if the jury will make anything of it, but in my opinion, it definitely communicates that Amber was very unhappy with how that all went down, which is something that really can be detected by the jury. Anyway, after that, we turn to more video depositions. Boring, but important to get through. And this time it was of Io Tillett-Wright and Raquel or Rocky Pennington. Both of them testified to essentially being former best friends of Amber, which I've got to say does seem like a bit of a red flag. Usually a jury is going to note that none of Amber's friends are testifying physically in the court to support her. Oh, hello. And honestly, this is only made more stark in contrast to the large number of witnesses who testified live for Johnny, in person and through a live video link. And this becomes a red flag for the jury because it flags a lack of emotional support for the credibility of Amber's story. If you can't rely on your best friends to show up in court for you, who else can you really rely on? Now, other than that detail, there's really not that much of interest that came out of either deposition. In Io's case, he testified that he never saw any of the alleged incidents, but that he, of course, saw Johnny doing a lot of drugs and alcohol over the time that he had been around him. He also seemed to testify basically that everything that he knew about them was information that he had gotten from Amber or Johnny. The only exception to the May 21st, 2016 incident is where Io said that he was on the phone with Amber when Johnny started screaming at Amber. Now, I have to note that these things that Io testified to hearing over the phone that night were consistent with Amber's testimony. But, and I don't know if this is just me, it felt a little bit too consistent, if you think that's possible. Essentially identical to Amber's narrative. Now, I say this with some hesitation and with some caution because corroboration is in fact important in any case, including and probably especially this one. And having another witness to testify to essentially the same facts will typically show consistency. But there was something about Io's illustration of what he had heard that felt like it was maybe even word for word verbatim what Amber had testified to about that incident. And this includes the points where Amber was very vague on the important points and very specific about seemingly superfluous details, which would tend to make it look a little bit less like corroboration and more like, I don't know, maybe some kind of a joint conspiracy. And then for Rocky Pennington's testimony, she is expected to finish her testimony tomorrow, but from what we saw, she really only touched on the Hicksville trailer park incident, and everything else just kind of felt like fluff. But even then, with the Hicksville incident, she testified to a number of things that were not exactly helpful for Amber's case. First, she said that Amber and Kelly Sue Milano were in fact hugging in a chair when Johnny came by and told Kelly Sue to quote unquote get off my woman. Second, Rocky did not testify to seeing any kind of a threat by Johnny to break Kelly Sue's wrist. Third, Rocky said that Johnny was being aggressive, but she couldn't give any kind of details on what Johnny was doing that made it seem like he was being aggressive. And finally, although she said that she saw the trailer that Amber and Johnny used and that it had later looked trashed, she never said that she witnessed Johnny's rage. In fact, she affirmatively said that she had never witnessed Johnny's rage. So by the end of the day, Rocky's testimony wasn't finished, but ultimately also it was arguably unhelpful to Amber's case. And we'll see what else comes out of Rocky's video deposition tomorrow, as it is scheduled to resume then. But did you see any of this testimony? If so, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you found this interesting or at least informative. And if you did, I would love it if you hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded and so you can join us for day 18 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial right here on this channel. See you in the next video.